Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, and I would like to call to order the September 10th meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust. Next item on the agenda is the minutes from the August 27th meeting. They are in your packet. Do the trustees have any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval? A motion and a second. And it passes unanimously. Next up is the consent docket. Several items on the consent docket. There's items to be put out for bid. There's some construction awards. There's a request for proposals, a couple of change orders and amendments. There are a number of change orders and amendments, actually, is most of it. And of course, our ratification of payments. Are there any items on the consent docket that the trustees would like to pull or have questions or comments regarding? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent docket? We have a motion, and it passes. The concurrence docket, there are two items of concurrence, both with the City of Oklahoma City. One has to do with the street widening project around Post Road and 44th Street. And the other is an improving a amendment on a contract with Allen Contracting at the pedestrian bridge on Northwest Expressway. Neither of these projects involve any water trust funds. So are there any questions or comments regarding the two items on the concurrence docket? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval? And it passes unanimously. Two items on the emergency, under item 4. The first is a item for emergency purchase order for a tank for the Deer Creek Treatment Plant. I don't believe we've ever done this before, Mr. Browning, so can you explain this to us a little bit?
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to. We have a lime storage tank at the Deer Creek wastewater treatment facility used for sludge dewatering. That tank has failed and leaned. It's on top of the building. And so we have emptied the tank and we're leasing another tank temporarily. The replacement of that tank is included in the biosolids and odor control upgrades that will be coming soon to the treatment facility. So in the interim, we're going to lease a tank to provide lime storage.
Interesting situation. Any questions regarding that to Mr. Browning? Seeing none, is there a motion for approval? And it passes. The second emergency has to do with the South Canadian wastewater plant. This is actually a little bit of a unique situation too. It has to do with replacing the breaker. Yes,
sir. This facility is, as you know, under construction to build a new facility. This is under the old part of the plant. The 3,000 amp breaker failed, and we had to bring in a temporary generator in an emergency to enable the plant to continue to treat. And so this is ratifying the actions of the general manager in regard to the generator.
Okay. I suppose we should keep electricity on there. All right, any questions regarding the emergency? Is there a motion for approval? And it passes unanimously. Item 6A is also an item we don't see every day, and that is the sale of a portion of the West Elm Creek Reservoir outside of the inundation area back to the city of Oklahoma City.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This is approximately 100 acres south of 240 and west of Midwest Boulevard. The sale of the property would be used, or the property would be used for a police and fire training facility. This property is outside the inundation area and outside the 660-foot buffer reserved for watershed protection at the future reservoir. So we recommend surplus of the property. We recommend your consideration
Okay,
for
and
that
and it's
sale.
being compensated for fair market value,
Yes, sir, it is.
which is required by our attorney.
And an appraisal was completed and the payment was agreed upon.
Mr. Freeman, you want to offer a lower price or?
No, I think we're good where we are.
Okay. All right, are there any questions? I think, has the council already seen this, or is it going to the council?
It'll come to the next meeting.
Council, okay.
Is that right? You thought it was today?
Okay, maybe.
Yeah, it was on concurrence today, that's right.
It was.
It was, it
Okay.
was.
All right, is there a motion to approve the sale of the property? And it passes unanimously. The next item is something we see occasionally, but not all that often, every several years. But it's probably one of the most important things we do here, and that has to do with our cost of service and rate design recommendations and new recommendations on water rates. And so I believe we have a presentation.
We do,
This
and we
afternoon.
have Vanessa Aguilar here to introduce our rate consultant.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Trustees. Vanessa Aguilar with the Utilities Department. This item that you have before you today is a resolution authorizing the general manager and the general counsel to finalize an ordinance of rate recommendations. With me today, I have Terry Boveri with Raftellus Financial Consultants, who is our consultant that we've engaged industry experts to help us look at the cost of service study, analyze that by each of the three utilities, and provide recommendations.
Thank you, Vanessa. And good afternoon, everyone. Okay. For the record, my name is Terry Boveri, Vice President with Raftellus, and was tasked and commissioned by Aqua to prepare a cost of service study. I have a brief presentation for you that we're going to run through a few slides. The first slide up is to discuss a little bit of about what are the key changes since the last study. There was a cost of service study performed in 2021, and since then there have been some material changes. One of the biggest has been inflation to the cost of operations and maintenance. We have a graphic to the right that identifies the cumulative change over the last few years in CPI and PPI, indicating some fairly significant increases being experienced within the industry and utilities. By way of example, specific costs of the utility, electric costs have gone up about 85% over the last several years, which wasn't really factored into the original plan of finance for the cost of service study. Chemical costs have gone up about 155% over that same period of time. Labor costs have been up 37%, which is one of the single largest costs within the budget. And interest rates related to the cost of capital and borrowing for Aqua has also gone up substantially over the last several years. Faced with all of these pressures, we've had to come back and reevaluate, and there's some net effects to the financial plan we're going to discuss in the ensuing slides. Overall, inflation on the operations related to operating expenses have been around 15% over the prior financial plan, but a bigger effect has been seen in the CIP. During the prior study, the original rate plan, we identified around $3.6 billion in capital spending over the roughly 11-year period, 10-year period. And today, we're closer to $6.1 billion. If you look at the chart to the bottom right, you'll notice that we had some deferred spending in 2024 for some capital projects required financing, and that because of the higher cost of operation and maintenance that I touched on earlier, there were less revenues available from the capital plan. You can see the bar on the left, the darker bar in that bottom right chart, with the spending dropping in 27, 28, 29. That's sort of a result of that lower revenues available to fund the capital plan. So because of that, in this financial plan, and in addition to the fact that there were additional projects that were needed, for example, if we were to break down that capital plan, over 90% or roughly 90% of the capital plan is related to resiliency and water supply projects for the needs of the system within the plan. And many of those projects identified above the original plan starting in 2029, 2030, that was largely because of the higher costs and the inability to fully fund the program. So I mentioned earlier that, what are the consequences of the higher inflation? Well, one of those consequences is that we wouldn't be able to fully execute the capital plan. And with the additional projects that would be needed as well for the resiliency, reliability, redundancy, the utility facing some challenges, I would say, based on our conversations. So faced with these higher inflationary pressures, we recalculated the financial plan under the original cost of service and the methodology that was used back in 2021, and updated those bill impacts, and we found that we needed roughly about 5.5% increase for a low volume user over what was adopted. This is a low volume user. Includes roughly 2,000 gallons for water and wastewater service and 2-cart service for trash. Over the entire 5-year period, over the previously adopted rate plan, we've identified around $3.27 per month increase over. And then I have 2 more slides on the residential impacts to run everyone through. For the average volume user at 7,000 gallons of water and 5,000 gallons on the wastewater, along with the solid waste bill, we're identifying $5.53 above what was previously adopted to address the inflation and the additional capital needs within the system. And over the 5-year period, that averages closer to about $4.90 over what was adopted or identified from the prior study. So the seasonal irrigation user, this is a larger volume water customer, 20,000 gallons per month, 6,000 gallon wastewater bill, and you can see the stacked bar chart showing a substantially greater water bill. Incrementally would be seeing around $6.55 higher than what was adopted under the proposed rate plan, and over the subsequent 5 years averaging around a little under $7.50 per month. So a common question is, how do we compare locally and within the region? The next 2 slides will be running you through that. You can see with the adopted and the proposed bill increases for the average that we had presented earlier, we're still within range of those other comparables. And the other point to be made here is that inflation is not unique to Aqua or Oklahoma City. It's affecting everyone in the region and nationally, and that we know on average utility bills have been increasing in the mid to high single digit year over year for the last several years now because of this. We expect that many on this comparison are in process or reviewing their rates, and that likely they're going to be raising their rates as well, just as we see here. So this is a static comparison today, but we expect it to change over time. Particularly as other factors influence their cost of operations, potentially going less groundwater, more superficial water in their mix of water supply, driving up their costs, among other things. So the regional comparison broadens out a little bit more, and we can see here the utility is still reasonable in the middle range there with the adopted and the proposed rates. We can see some utilities on the left-hand side on the lower end and some utilities flanking on the right on the higher end. Some explanation around why is there this variability. Some of the utilities on the right end might be under consent, have CSO issues, among other things. Those on the left have different system characteristics, Aqua has significant investment in water supply infrastructure, linear assets that are at times greater than what some of these other comparable peer utilities are listed here. So each utility, the characteristic of the water supply, the infrastructure required to deliver the service is somewhat unique. But overall, the utility still remains comparable.
Go back there for a second if you don't mind. You know, it's really amazing that we are in that mid-range section because of our investment on long-term water and have water for generational water for years, raw water for generation, because I know that Dallas and Fort Worth do not fall in that same category.
Yeah. And it's also too, I mean, there are many other factors at play. If you were to study maybe the audited financial statements for some of these entities, you might find that perhaps they're not generating the same amount of cash flow after they pay their O&M and debt service payments that your utility might be, and that could be an indicator that they may be on the verge of also having to raise their rates should they encounter the similar types of capital needs that we're seeing here with the utilities. So there are many different factors at play, and usually those that are on the left end tend to come up and closer to the average over time.
I guess some of those on the left end may not also be AAA rated.
That as well, and I mean that's somewhat of an indicator if you don't have enough cash flow margins. So.
Explain some of the demographics of some of those cities as well compared to Oklahoma City that we spoke about just a little while ago.
Sure. So let's maybe focus in on city of Dallas. They have about they service about 2.4 million people. Oklahoma City services about 1.4 million people. So we have maybe 7,000 or so miles of line for the city of Oklahoma City, and Dallas is just maybe a hair under 9,000 miles of line. Yet they're serving 60 or 70% more people through that utility infrastructure by way of example. So we turn our attention to commercial bill impacts related to the proposed over the adopted. You can see here that they range depending on the different types of businesses. So we looked at representative sample bills for different types of non-residential services ranging from commercial, hospital, hotel, small multifamily, large multifamily, office, large office, and restaurant. And generally, they're all within range of that 6 to 7% increase within the commercial sector. They're also following through, as I mentioned earlier, on the same cost of service. We haven't changed that methodology, and we just updated for the newer costs that we have, and how that plays out in the cost of service resulted in the calculated rates for the commercial non-residential sector. So we presented earlier the residential bill impacts. That also included the solid waste bill. Here's just a little bit more information in detail about the solid waste bill. This is not in addition to what we presented. This is just a more detailed drill down to the solid waste bill over the next several years. You'll notice that for the proposed monthly fee for 1 to 2 cart service, in the first year, it's about a 65-cent differential from the proposed to adopted. And that 65-cent differential is the same generally every year. It adds 65 cents every year on the change. So by the final year, we're about $3 over what we had originally presented to provide you a little bit more detail. Yeah, the increases here aren't as significant as we're seeing on the water and sewer side, simply because we don't have the same capital drivers on the solid waste side that we do, and also to remind everyone that solid waste is more driven by contract operations and labor and fuel and equipment costs. Lastly, an important segment of the customer base is the partnerships that exist with the wholesale providers. This is a benefit in the sense that you can spread those fixed costs of operations over a larger base of your customers. In this case, the wholesale customers provide a benefit, and Aqua provides a benefit to them with water supply. So when we look at the bill impacts in their case, originally we had identified in the plan about a 5% increase to those rates. In this plan, it's closer to about 7% per year on average. And it's a little bit more front-loaded, as you can see by the chart on the bottom right. But generally speaking, the wholesale customers are contributing and participating in the cost increase, just like all the other customers, and continue to provide a benefit to the retail customers of the system by sharing in those fixed costs through economies of scale. So I would just like to close out what were the key findings from the engagement and some recommendations for your consideration. The first is that with the inflation and the cost of operations, significant costs we talked about earlier, relative to the prior plan, we're only about 15% higher than we were several years ago. So I think that's actually a positive, I think, being that there's conservative financial planning built in, but that we still had to recognize a higher cost, and that impacted the rate needs of the system. That inflation on the O&M side translated to the capital plan, a bit more pronounced, as we talked about earlier, going from around $3 billion to about $6 billion in capital spending, 3.6 to about 6.1 billion in capital spending. And so that drives the need for higher debt payments, higher interest payments. Without any additional rate increases, the consequence of that are that we're going to have to defer a substantial amount of capital within the financial plan. Therefore, we'd recommend consideration of the proposed rate plan. I just want to remind everyone that this particular rate plan that we worked out with staff is phased in over the 5-year period, the increases. So I mentioned earlier the inflation on our operating costs. We're not recovering that in the first year. That's being recovered over the multiple 5-year period, phased in. And that the proposed plan achieves all the policy objectives as was intended with the original study several years ago. And would like to offer up, if you have any questions at this time, to address those.
I don't. I know that there's a lot of work that's been put into that. I know we've had a lot of different scenarios that have been looked at, and I know that we've revised the capital plan several times too, and had to skinny that down. And I really think you've done a good job of meeting all the goals of minimizing the rate increase, being able and cutting back on the capital plan to help minimize that rate increase, and to arrange a rate structure that minimizes the impact to small users of the system. Mr. Stonecipher?
Just the presentation you made today, could I get a copy of that to study,
Yes, sir.
please? It was very helpful.
Other questions regarding the presentation? Seeing none, is there a resolution, or is there a motion to adopt the resolution as outlined in item 6B? Motion a second, and it passes. Thank you. And I know this work has gone on for years to get to this point, so I really appreciate the culmination of this and the good compromises that were made. Thank you. Items from trustees. Do we have any items this afternoon? General manager reports. Mr. Browning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to give everybody an update. I'm sure that most of you all have heard that we've had a large main break, a 36-inch main, over close to the intersection between Penn and 10th. The main is probably at least 100 years old. And so there's parts of our system connected that maybe we don't have accurate records for over time. Things were installed and records weren't kept as well back then as they are today. So we've been dealing with trying to isolate this section of the main so that we can replace the broken parts. So last night, crews have been working around the clock. Last night we were able to insert a valve on a 16-inch main that ties in. that we were not aware of. That main was causing water to continue to flow through that 36. So we have that done. And then the valves on the south and east side of the main, we were able to shut those, but the valve on the north side, we're not able to shut, so we're going to come and insert another valve in place of that one that's 100 years old so that we can shut it. That part is on the way right now. We'll be working through the night to do that. And then we should be able to isolate that main and replace the broken joint. So that's the status. Right now, pressures downtown are near normal because we were able to isolate, particularly the 16. It was just pulling all the water out of the downtown area. So we're in pretty good shape on pressures. So right now, things are under control, and we have a plan, and we're moving forward with the plan. It's just taking a minute to get it done.
Thank you.
Happy to answer questions on that if you have any.
Questions for Mr. Browning?
Okay. Secondly, lake levels. Hefner is about 3.5 feet below full pool. Draper's 4.6. Canton's full. Tok is 2 feet down, and McGee Creek is 3.7 feet down. But now they're supposed to be getting some rain this next week down in southeast Oklahoma, so we may pick up some water down there. That's all I have on lake levels. And again, I would like to thank the entire team for all the hard work that they do. It takes a lot of work, a lot of folks, and thank you very much to everybody. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Browning. Any other questions for Mr. Browning? Nope. Citizens to be heard. Mark D. Falk. Please hold your comments.
Email. Good afternoon, guys. I just saw an email that I should have brought some additional copies. So I did not know to make additional copies. Can I hook a computer up here? You've got it. Oh, good. Well, there you go. So thanks for hearing us today. I live in Warwick neighborhood. My name's Mark Falk. I've been in oil and gas business, geophysicist, geologist for 40 years. Engineering degree from Oklahoma State. Our neighborhood, Warwick, 122nd and MacArthur, we have been seeing super high water pressures for quite a few years, probably 20 years. So what we'd like to do is talk to the Water Trust about how we can get a reduction in water pressure at some main line that comes into our neighborhood so that we don't all experience the slab leaks and have to put in the water pressure relief valves that we're now being asked to put in on our own. So page 2 of my presentation, this is just an example of a typical water pressure in our neighborhood. This one is 110 pounds. Several of our neighbors have seen 140 pounds. So recommended pressures, as per Mr. Browning, recommended pressures are 50 to 80 pounds. We consistently see greater than 100 pounds in our neighborhood. I put together a partial list of homeowners who have experienced slab leaks. This list, I think, is close to 30 homes that have had slab leaks in our neighborhood. On my block, I think 6 of the 8 houses have had slab leaks, and they're all directly connected to the pressure of the water coming into the house. A couple of photographs of my neighbor, John Broom, who is here with me now. He's had several slab leaks. As you can imagine, the cost of those leaks is pretty exorbitant. I included some emails from John and some replies from Mr. Browning. We've gotten the same reply. Everybody who writes in to ask about pressure, we get the same. I think it's just the letter that the water board issues or that the city water department issues regarding pressures. I'm an engineer. I know there's elevation increases to overcome. Our suspicion in talking with other employees of the city is that the pressure is high at our neighborhood because of our proximity to the water plant. And because the water has to get further out to new neighborhoods in the city, I think our neighborhood is seeing that higher pressure than what we're really ready for. We've had several water main breaks in our neighborhood. I included one a couple of blocks from our house that was impressive to watch. So while my grandkids had fun watching that, it was probably, 30 feet, 40 feet in the air? So a significant leak. So we called KFOR just because we were kind of at wit's end to know what to do. They came out and did a story. They tried to follow up, I think, with Mr. Browning. I don't think there was a reply. Not that I expected that to be a reply, but what we would like now, at least to initiate a discussion on how the city could put some kind of a pressure relief valve, at least at a main coming into our neighborhood, so that we're not all responsible. We've estimated the costs probably for the individual homes just in our neighborhood, probably without any relief, probably going to push $25 million in repairs, insurance, and installation of pressure relief valves. So I know John's output was about $15,000 to get his repaired. Mine was pushing $8,000 to get repaired. And even installation of a pressure relief valve probably pushes $1,500 to $2,000 to have that pressure relief valve installed privately. So we'd like to at least initiate a conversation on how, if that's possible, how to regulate the pressure coming into our neighborhood, and welcome any conversation with Mr. Browning in your office, if that's possible. So thank you.
Quick question for you. The pressure's always been high there. Has it changed? Has it gotten worse?
It's still high.
No, I understand. I understand it's still high, but
That I don't know.
okay.
That I don't know. I know when ours broke, when we got our pressure, when we got our plumbing repaired beneath the house, our pressure was 124. So,
All right. Thank you for that.
okay, thank you guys.
Mr. Broom?
So, okay. I just wanted to add on to Mark. My experience began, and I think Mark and I have become the pressure reducing valve champions of the neighborhood, and everyone calls us now about slab leaks. I was in the middle of Lake Texoma, and fortunately, I had put water sensors up in my house that are tagged to my alarm system. I got an alarm, called a neighbor, he went over, he said, your house is flooded. And I think my house is 3,400 square feet. It took out 2,000 square feet of my house. Lived on concrete, house forever. I did call customer service. I said, hey, there's something going on with the pressure, because this has all happened within the last 2 years that we start hearing of all these things. And I don't know what the pressure was before. I asked the city, I said, has the pressure increased? The lady at the customer service said, no, I don't think so. I said, well, can you talk to an engineer and just find out? She did. She said, well, we figured out that you must have something at your house that increases the pressure. I said, well, I don't. I don't have a booster pump. I get I receive what you get, what you're giving. And, but it's, like Mark said, I was out about $15,000 ultimately, because I had one slab leak while they were fixing that slab leak and jackhammering up my house to get down to it and putting PEX in. As they were fixing it and repairing the drywall, the painter called me and he said, you got another one. And my air ducts were flooded again while he was fixing it. And that one was about 6 feet away from where the previous one was. Then I had one, I walked back into my closet on the very back of the house, and my floor was hot. And I've got a water heater back there, and it had blown. So during this, it took three slab leaks. It took out 2 water heaters, and ultimately, because of the claims, my insurance dropped me. And then all of a sudden, trying to find insurance is really difficult without paying about an extra $3,000 a year right now till those claims disappear off of my record. So we're frustrated. I know a lady catty-corner to me, behind me. She spent I think she overpaid, but she spent $25,000 to redo her house because her second floor flooded. And so she had to replace all of her, she had to repipe her entire house. I know in talking to my plumber, he said just in the Warwick Blue Stem neighborhoods, he himself, with just one plumbing company, he said he's probably done 40 slab leaks in those two neighborhoods. We have, Mark put a thing on our Facebook account for people to reply, and I think it's now up to about 40 people have said they've had slab leaks just in the last 2-3 years. So I mean, our houses are all built in like ours were built, I think, around 84, 83, 84, something like that. But it's kind of all of a sudden gotten to it seems like a culmination. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Ms. Browning, could we maybe meet with them, an engineer, and meet with them offline and
Absolutely.
try to understand the scope of the project? I mean, I think we understand that it's always been high out there, and it's a situation where the pressure outside of Overholser to get the water to the west, you've got to get, you're going through a low elevation area which has higher pressure, and you're trying to get to a higher elevation that has, to keep the pressure up there and to get the water quantity out. I know you've done distribution improvements over the last decade or two to continue to get water out there. There was a time, I know, many years ago where Surrey Hills had no water every night, and things have been done to the system so that it didn't matter how high you raised the pressure, it wasn't getting out to Surrey Hills at one point in time because there wasn't enough distribution infrastructure in place. I know that's, for the most part, been remedied. But still, I've heard what they had to say. There's an issue there. Could we talk to them and meet with a couple?
Yes.
So you'll contact them at some time, and
If you'll stick around for a few minutes, I'll come talk to you right now.
thank you for coming down. I sympathize with the issue. Seeing no other citizens have been signed up to speak, so therefore there's no further business, and we are adjourned. Thank you.